Welcome to this deep dive, and a special welcome to parents and individuals navigating 22q11.2 deletion syndrome.
Hi there.
Today, we're really zeroing in on understanding scoliosis, specifically within the context of 22q.
That's right. We've been digging into a really insightful study. It was published in Spine Deformity just this March 2025.
Hey.
The lead author is Sabrina Donzelli, and the title is What Can We Learn from Scoliosis in Children with the 22q11.2 Deletion Syndrome? It looks at prognostic factors for different forms of scoliosis during adolescence.
Right. Okay. So let's unpack this a little. For anyone listening who might be newer to this, 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, it's a genetic condition, and it can affect people in, well, quite a few different ways.
Mm.
And this research really highlights that scoliosis, that's a curve in the spine, it's something we see quite a bit more often in individuals with 22q.
Yeah, definitely. In the general population, scoliosis affects maybe 1 to 3% of people. But this study points out it's way more common with 22q11.2 deletion syndrome. We're talking around half, about 50% of cases.
Wow, half. That's a huge difference.
It really is. And it tells us we really need to be paying attention to this.
Exactly. So that's really the goal of this deep dive today. Taking what this research tells us and focusing on the practical stuff, for you listening.
Yeah.
What steps to take if scoliosis is diagnosed in someone with 22q? How can you support them at home, at school, and importantly, where can you find the right kind of help?
And one fascinating thing the researchers found is that how scoliosis develops in people with 22q shares some characteristics with the more common type, adolescent idiopathic scoliosis, or AIS.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's important because it suggests that studying scoliosis in 22q might actually give us clues about scoliosis more generally.
That is a really interesting link. Okay, so practical takeaways. The study really bangs the drum for starting screening early, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They stress that regular X-ray screenings for scoliosis are recommended for everyone with 22q11.2 deletion syndrome.
Okay.
And ideally, this screening should start, around the time of the 22q diagnosis itself, which is often before kids hit those big adolescent growth spurts.
Right, before things might really take off.
Exactly. And the researchers, they're actually based at a national center where they have this kind of routine screening and follow-up protocol already in place.
Makes total sense. Catching things early, it just seems logical it would be better. Okay, so the study also tried to figure out how scoliosis might progress, right? What were the key findings there?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. They were looking for early clues, signs that might predict if a scoliosis case would stay mild, maybe even resolve on its own, or if it was likely to get worse during the teenage years. And what they found was, well, before a curve becomes clinically noticeable, so we're talking less than 10 degrees on an X-ray, it's actually really hard to tell who's going to develop more significant scoliosis just based on those standard X-ray measurements alone.
So those early X-rays, even if there's a tiny curve, they don't necessarily predict the future very well.
Not reliably, no. Not in terms of predicting significant progression later on, based on what this study found looking at coronal, sagittal, and transverse plane parameters.
Okay, so a key point there is that those early X-rays by themselves aren't crystal balls, which really underlines why you need that consistent, ongoing monitoring as kids grow up.
Precisely. But they did manage to pinpoint one specific marker, a sign that seemed to indicate when scoliosis progression might speed up.
Oh, what was that?
It's called the closure of the triradiate cartilage.
The triradiate cartilage.
Well,
Okay, I need to bring that down. What is that exactly? And why is its closure such an important sign?
sure. So the triradiate cartilage, it's basically a growth plate in the hip bone, in the pelvis. When it closes or fuses, it's a pretty good indicator that the body's starting the main pubertal growth spurt.
Okay. The big growth phase.
Right. And the study found that the chances of a spinal curve accelerating the most, they went up significantly after this cartilage had closed.
Wow.
It's like a biological flag saying, okay, rapid growth incoming. And for some individuals with 22q, that period is when scoliosis can really progress faster.
That's fascinating. So this thing happening in the hip gives a clue about the spine. Incredible. And this closure, it's a better indicator than, say, the riser stage. I know there's another way doctors assess skeletal maturity. The study mentioned research didn't seem predictive in their models.
That's correct, yeah. In this specific group, individuals with 22q11.2 DS, The Reiser stage didn't really show prognostic value in their predictive models for scoliosis progression.
Interesting.
And another little observation they made was that being male seemed to be somewhat protective against the curve getting really large by the time someone was skeletally mature, so done growing.
Okay, interesting nuance there.
Yeah.
So let's bring this back to the practical side. For you listening parents, individuals with 22q, what does all this mean day to day? What are the actionable things based on this research?
Well, I think the number one thing, especially right after a 22q diagnosis, is to really commit to that recommended scoliosis screening schedule. Don't miss those appointments.
Right.
This usually involves regular clinical checkups, but also those specialized x-rays, the biplanar full spine radiographs. At first, maybe every couple of years, but if any scoliosis is actually detected, your team will likely want to check more often.
Got it. Stick to the schedule. Super important. Okay, what about support at home, at school? What guidance does this research offer there?
So while the study shows it's hard to predict progression from those very, very early x-rays, it just reinforces how vital that ongoing monitoring is, particularly as kids approach puberty. The researchers suggest that paying attention to clinical signs could be helpful. Things like the angle of trunk rotation, or ATR, that's a measurement doctors take when someone bends forward to check for back asymmetry.
Okay.
And also, just tracking height and weight changes carefully, that can help gauge when that growth spurt is really kicking in, which we now know is a critical time.
So it's about being observant, noticing changes,
Yeah.
and then communicating those.
Exactly. Having those open conversations with your doctors or healthcare team about any asymmetries or concerns you spot is really key.
And it's probably also important to remember, like the research points out, that even with great screening, predicting the exact path of scoliosis before it really shows up is still a challenge. Researchers are definitely still working on this.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing area of study.
Yeah.
And when it comes to getting the right help, it's just so important to be connected with a multidisciplinary team.
Mm-hmm.
A team that really has experience managing 22q 11.2 deletion syndrome overall. And that team absolutely needs to include orthopedists who specialize in scoliosis.
Right. Specialists are key.
Yeah. And often those national referral centers for 22q, like the one where these researchers work, they have these established screening protocols and follow-up care pathways already set up. They can be fantastic resources.
And beyond the medical team, what about connecting with others? Support networks, organizations? That must be helpful too.
Oh, hugely helpful. Connecting with support networks and organizations focused on 22q can make such a difference.
Yeah.
They offer, emotional support, practical advice, a chance to talk to other families, other individuals who really get it. And they often have lists of resources, doctors, you name it.
That shared experience is so valuable.
Invaluable.
Okay, so if we were to boil it down, the big message from this research seems to be that time around puberty, signaled by the closure of that triradiate cartilage in the hip, that's a really critical window for potential scoliosis progression in 22q.
That's a perfect summary. Yeah.
Right.
Consistent monitoring during that phase is just essential.
Right. And, well, knowing exactly how things will play out early on is still tough.
It is.
But it's good to know that ongoing research, like this study, and just sticking with regular follow-ups, it's all helping us understand and manage scoliosis better.
Definitely. Progress is being made.
It is reassuring, isn't it? Knowing that with that regular monitoring, access to expert care, families and individuals can work towards the best possible outcomes for managing scoliosis linked with 22q.
Absolutely. It's about partnership with your healthcare team and staying informed.
Well, thanks for walking us through this research. Really valuable insights. And for everyone listening, keep those conversations going with your doctors and support networks.
My pleasure. Stay proactive.